Welcome to another session of the Expanded States of Consciousness Summit. I'm Ron Siegel, a clinical psychologist here at Harvard Medical School in the USA, and I'll be your co-host for this session. Today, I have the great pleasure of interviewing a real pioneer in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, Dr. Rosalind Watts. Welcome, Roz, and thank you so much for joining the summit.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to be here.
I'd like to start by sharing a little bit about your background with our audience, and then we'll jump right into the conversation, okay?
Yes, sounds good.
So Dr. Rosalind Watts is a clinical psychologist and founder of ASSER Integration. Her contributions to the field of psychedelic therapy are numerous and include the development of the ACE model, Accept, Connect, Embody, which has been used in clinical trials of both psilocybin and DMT, as well as the Watts Connectedness Scale, which is a psychometric tool for measuring outcomes of psychedelic therapy. Dr. Watts is the former clinical lead in the psilocybin for depression trial at the Imperial College of London, the clinical track lead on the Synthesis Institute's psychedelic practitioner training, and sits on the clinical advisory board of the USONA Institute. Dr. Watts has been named as one of the top 50 most influential people in psychedelics, as well as one of the top 16 women shaping the future of psychedelics. As you'll soon hear, Dr. Watts has been on the vanguard of advancing integration, harm reduction, and inclusion in the psychedelic space. And she's been a particular pioneer at figuring out how to help people convert the profound insights that arise in expanded states of consciousness into lasting growth. So I think I'll jump right in with some questions that are on my mind. So Roz, how would you define expanded states of consciousness? And do you have a sense of how the expanded states that occur in psychedelic medicines might compare with those that arise in other contexts?
It's such a good question. Thank you for it. And actually it gives me a chance in a way to riff a little bit on some of my most recent work, which is I'm always trying to think of metaphors and analogies and ways of explaining some of these ideas because they can feel quite vague and nebulous. And particularly if people haven't had a psychedelic experience, the idea of what it might be like in that state of consciousness can be quite hard to grasp. And even if you have had a psychedelic experience, your state of consciousness might be wildly different from one experience to another. They're so varied, the states that they can bring about. So I've been thinking of analogies and metaphors, and one of the metaphors I've been working on recently to try and describe the different levels almost of the states of consciousness of these experiences is of the tree. I often use nature-based metaphors. If you think of a tree and you think of its roots, its trunk, and its branches, I think it can really help us understand the way that in a psychedelic experience and in meditation experiences and other, going on a kind of darkness retreat where you didn't see any light for many days, or doing breath work, so many of these experiences can lead to the same kind of states of consciousness. And it's essentially kind of the ego mind turning off and allowing us to go both deeper but also higher. So the roots of the tree, they go down into the earth, they go down into the darkness. And often the people that I've worked with in these experiences, they do go down into the darkness. They go and see the rocks underneath their tree that their tree had to grow around, what their roots had to grow around, the things in their childhood that were really difficult for them to cope with. But then they also can have experiences of being very embodied. So if you think of the trunk of the tree as being about embodiment, that sense of the trunk of our body and the trunk of the tree, our belly, our heart, our chest. Sometimes we exist in our mind in the Western world. We're so stuck in our heads. And these kind of experiences remind people that they have a body. Sometimes really for the first time, they feel viscerally the insides of their body. They feel their organs, the viscera. They feel their innards. They really feel that sense of having a heart, and that the heart has retained trauma and pain and wounds, and that the heart speaks, and to really feel it. So there's the roots, which is the kind of going down into difficult experiences. There's the trunk, which is the breathing body in the here and now and really feeling what the body is saying. And then there's the branches, and that's the part of us that reaches up into meaning, takes what we learn in the roots and brings it up through our bodies to the sky. And that's more around insight, these light bulb moments that people can get, suddenly seeing things in a totally different way. and also the branches reach up to the sun. And that's a metaphor for the sacred. But so often people, it's almost like being able to pierce up through the clouds of their usual waking consciousness and actually taste that feeling. Or I say taste that feeling, that's like synesthesia. Feel something around the sun, what it feels like to come up above the clouds and feel that blue sky. And that can be the beauty of a mystical experience, or some experience where they feel connected to the whole web and feel themselves as sacred. So yeah, the tree, all the different levels.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your articulating the different levels and pointing out that it can be hard to know in any, whether we get to an expanded state through contemplative practice or we get to it through a psychedelic experience. It's hard to know which parts of that tree are going to be most illuminated at each moment, Oftentimes when I'm talking to psychotherapists about talking to their clients about meditation retreats, I have a sort of rule of thumb, which is it's a good idea to have sat a few silent meditation retreats yourself before you recommend this, because you kind of need to know that some of them are going to be about those branches reaching up to the sky. And you may think, oh, well, wouldn't that be wonderful for my client to experience? But they may go on a retreat and it may be entirely about those roots. And that may be quite challenging, and they may not be ready to be with those roots. So this idea that it can be quite different in each session of an expanded state, if you will, as well as each moment within some kind of process, whether it's a psychedelic journey or a meditation retreat. And it's useful to be open, I guess, to all elements of the tree.
Absolutely. And to be really, like you say, in that sense of preparation and readiness for what things can feel like if you do go to those deeper layers underneath, and how visceral, like there's something about almost like imagining the rocks and the earth, and imagining like really digging in the dirt, like what that feels like. Because so often I find when you prepare people for a psychedelic experience, or the same would go, as you say, for like a Vipassana or meditation retreat, there's that sense of, you can tell people that it might be difficult and people think, yeah, it's okay, I'm prepared. But really, really preparing yourself for how visceral and how terrifying it can be to really go down there, and how it's not just imagining something difficult, but your whole body is experiencing that sense of, kind of suffocating darkness. So I think, it's hard. It's a hard one to prepare people for. And often when people come back, they say, nothing could have prepared me for how intense that was.
Yeah, like the other people in the MDMA studies who say, why do they call this ecstasy?
Yeah.
The other thing I really like about your tree model is we intuitively get it, that all of the parts of the tree are necessary. That a tree can't exist without the upper part, the lower part, and the middle part. And that's really true about our work with expanded states also, isn't it? That trying to limit our investigation to one or another part isn't going to work, and it's not going to be fruitful.
Absolutely. And completely agree. And that, things shift and change, and that nature is a cycle, because the tree loses all its leaves, and then from the fallen leaves, the new seed will germinate. And that idea of, I think in the Western world, we want things to be in kind of summer all the time. And we want, in our psychedelic experiences, we want to go up to the sun. But when we really know that the web, the ecosystem is based on balance of the darkness and the light, the winter and the summer, I think it can help people get that sense of, wherever I go, it's part of the cycle. And that if I have an experience and it leads me to some kind of ongoing sense of opening and kind of spring afterwards, that will fade. And that's okay, because it's part of the cycle. You don't have to cling to those upper states all the time, but to let in darkness as well.
Yeah. And I think this is very related to another observation that happens with expanded states. People seem to have different reactions to experiences with expanded states, whether through psychedelics or other means. And some find them to be life-changing and are very grateful to have had them. But other times people see them just as odd experiences, and they sort of dismiss them as, well, that was weird. And yet others find them to be traumatic, and they become really afraid of revisiting them. I wonder if you could talk some about the variables that could contribute to one or another outcome. I mean, you're already touching on one variable, which is preparation and having something like the tree model as a way to prepare.
Yes, yeah, I think there is such variability and variety. Even in the same person, they can have very different experiences, different times. And I think some of it is that this idea of that we have an inner healing intelligence that knows what we need, and that the body is working to homeostasis and balance, and that at one moment we might need an experience of going deep down into those roots. Another moment we might need something that was more about, really feeling or going up into the branches in the sky. So I think a certain amount of the variability is maybe down to what we need at different times. But I also think that the safety factor is so key. So if people feel a sense of trust to who they are with, and trust in the room, and trust in the setting, trust in the music, it's so subtle, that sense of trust, and so many little tiny things can really, almost on a level that we wouldn't even really compute or be aware of, just subtly change our level of trust. And the little tiny ruptures in trust in the setting, in the container, with the therapist, with the preparation, can be really magnified in the experience too. So those really terrifying experiences sometimes can be, if there is some sense of a distrust in the setting. And certainly when we have had community integration groups for psychedelics, sometimes people have been to retreats where they just haven't really felt seen. If something starts to become difficult, it's almost like a weather system sometimes creeping in, that somebody will be having an experience and then something really challenging creeps in. And maybe if they had somebody's hand to hold and someone that they could kind of be close to, they might feel that they had the courage to really face it and look it in the eye and see what it meant, and let the feelings come in and say yes to them. But if there's no one there, then those feelings can be so challenging that they can start to panic and say no to them. And as soon as we start to get into that resistance of, I don't want to feel this, what's happening, this is weird, this isn't safe, what's happening, am I going mad? That's when, really experience can become really, really, really challenging. But I think also just, sometimes the stuff there at the roots, the big rocks are just really painful. And if we're not really expecting them to be there, we weren't aware they were there. Sometimes people have realizations of really awful things that have happened that they didn't know about, or then, those things can lead to experiences that, if they're not safely held, can be just so much to handle on your own.
Yeah, well, and then this happens in contemplative practice also. I've often led meditation retreats for psychotherapists, and most psychotherapists have been in their own therapy, and they have a sense of, well, I kind of know what baggage I bring with me into the world. But several days of sitting silently with one's own mind, and almost always, at least a few people will say, "Gosh, I thought I had really worked through my feelings and memories about this or that thing that happened, but wow, it just hit me and I was quite overwhelmed." So it's interesting that even when we think we know about those rocks and we think we know what's under the earth, if we really open into these expanded states, very often we have new discoveries.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sense of I don't know whether it's different in a contemplative practice or a meditation retreat, I guess, where perhaps there might be more a sense of being kind of a lone journeyer and you're kind of sitting on your own cushion. Whereas one of the things I like about psychedelic experiences is that they are inherently relational, that if they're done in a therapeutic way, you have your guide there. And that, when the roots of the tree, when they go really deep, they always find the mycelial layer and the roots of other trees. And so there is that sense of, like, even when you go really, really deep and you're going through all the rocks, if you go deep enough, then you're like, connection with other people. And sometimes the nature of the setting with someone there that's holding that caring role that, can wipe your tears and, hold your hand. There's something about that when we're really facing the hard stuff can feel really important. I don't know whether that would happen in a meditation retreat ever.
Actually, the retreats we structure for psychotherapists, we include a bit of that. We include opportunities to talk in the group about what's happening, and since the group's all therapists, people do tend to be supportive. So I think that's important. I think one of the limitations of the sort of traditional silent retreats where there isn't a chance for connecting is that, relationship is so powerful for holding and so powerful for healing that it's a shame to exclude that when we're opening to these states in which we're going to connect with the roots and the rocks.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things, as you talk about setting, there's an interesting idea came up from somebody who's in a mentor group that I was, where I was in the mentor role. It was in a training in psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And he recently wrote a paper, his name's Jim Miller, recently wrote a paper saying setting 2.0 and raising the really interesting observation that a setting that is safe and supportive and elicits that trust, that you're talking about the subtlety of what trust is about. The given subtle images, physical context, behavior on the part of the guides or therapists that elicits trust for one person might not elicit a sense of trust for another person. Even the idea that a sort of comfortable middle class decorated room with like a little bit like a Marriott hotel or something that would connote safety to give a person, well, maybe, but maybe not. There may be enormous cultural, familial differences around that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it will be so, I'm just so looking forward to when, whatever the kind of, circumstances need to be to allow it to happen. But when psychedelic healing can become something that is done by community for community within, the more kind of grassroots practices of using them, because then all of that trust and, doing it with the land that you are from and with the people that, I think it will be beautiful.
Yeah. Well, and related to that, you've been a real pioneer in developing models of integration for psychedelic experiences, ways to help people, make sense out of and also productive use of what's happened. And so what have you found are the biggest challenges of this phase of somehow being able to have this experience and then having it be useful in people's lives?
I think that something around this kind of second phase that we're in, I guess a couple of things come to mind. One of them is that the phase that we are in where there is this huge expectation. So in the kind of, I'm talking about phases in the kind of modern research sense. So obviously this is like a very late phase in the history of the use of plant medicines. But in the kind of Western adoption, use, some would say extraction, which is the point I'll cover in a minute, of these approaches, the first phase of these kind of early pilot studies were feasibility studies looking to see if anything happened, and this surprise when, wow, people say it's one of the most meaningful experiences in their life, and this shock because that was in the context of the Western stigma against psychedelics. And now we're in the phase where many people have read Michael Pollan's book, and there is that sense of real expectation of what this can bring, and it's going to be life-changing. And I find so many people are actually disappointed because there is this hope that it's going to reset the brain or just bring this huge change, and that often people, they maybe the idea of psychedelics as an amplifier hasn't really entered the consciousness yet, that they're an amplifier, that they can be a catalyst, a powerful tool to catalyze a relationship. And if you have the motivation to make changes in your life, they can really support that and bring that sense of a window of opportunity, helping you break old beliefs. But that so much work is required to really continue on that path. So I think, one thing that's difficult at this stage is the amount of hype, huge hype around psychedelics as a kind of miracle cure. And then I think the other thing that goes along with that is that we're now in the phase in the West of the kind of commercialization and lots of clinics popping up and it becoming really, I suppose, starting to be mainstreamed, which is in many ways a great thing. It allows more people access. But I think one of the real challenges of our time now is how to keep the sacred soul of this way of working and to not cut off the plant from the roots. So I saw recently that there have been ayahuasca pills that have been patented. And I haven't read the papers yet. It's on my to-do list to read them. I can't wait to read it. But my heart sank a bit when I saw it, because just thinking about how, the amazing power of the ayahuasca medicine and the people that have carried that at great personal risk. And then the idea of a company patenting ayahuasca pills. So I think the idea of benefit sharing with Indigenous groups and just how we can stay humble in how the medical approach can stay humble, how the commercial clinics can stay fair and equitable, and we can get the accessibility, but at the same time not lose the soul and not lose the heart of the work.
Yeah, well, and part of that, I think, I'm not expert on all of the different indigenous uses of plant medicine, but in general, I don't think it's seen as a one and done quick fix. I think in these cultural contexts, the plant medicines are seen as aids across a lifetime in working with our growth and development and inching toward whether we think of it as sanity or spiritual awakening. And, I think one of the problems with the hype that you're underscoring here is that, I think people think, well, this is going to be easy. This is going to be one and done, rather than a way to support a lifetime of growth and development.
Absolutely, so much. And the other thing that I understand from my limited knowledge of the Indigenous use of plant medicine is that it's so much about the collective and about the links to the planet and about balance. Not always. People often correct me when I idealize it too much. Say there's lots of different ways that people use psychedelic or plant medicines. You might want to discover where the best hunting is, or you might want to be, you can use it in kind of spiritual warfare. There's lots of different ways of using it, but that there is something about a collective, a community using this sacrament together in order to stay in balance with the ecosystem. And that, as well as us in the West thinking that it's one and done, we always, and this is one of the things that I really feel at the moment, we use it for our own individual, personal benefit. Mm-hmm. And of course, when we put psychedelics in the context of individualism, that's what will happen. But it seems so sad to me, given the time we are in, sixth mass extinction event, this time of global uncertainty and huge kind of social challenges, that we're still there's still this idea of, I'm going to optimize myself. I'm going to, be the best that I can be, rather than it's like going from the me to the we. And I think one of the beautiful things about the approach from Indigenous people is Indigenous peoples and the traditional use of plant medicine is, it's not about me making myself better, but it's about coming into balance with the whole, maintaining balance with the whole.
Yeah. And it's really, I think, useful that you're underscoring this, because these states are also, it's so easy for these states, whether they occur in meditative practice or with psychedelics or other means, to get all mixed in with narcissistic inflation, right? With the idea of, now I've seen the truth and I am, operating on a higher plane than you. Sometimes I kid that if a client comes into our office after a psychedelic experience and they say, oh, I've discovered that I'm God, and so are you, and so's that coffee cup, and so's that plant. Okay, that's fine. Then they're a transcendentalist like Thoreau, who lived down the block from where I am now. If they come in, they say, I'm God, or I'm the great shaman, and you're not, well, then we have a problem. And I think part of the hype can lead in that direction also.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's another of the concerns I have at this stage is seeing that, Well, yeah, when you think about the communities of people for whom psychedelic use has been quite high in a personal development context, think about kind of Burning Man kind of scene. Would we, as a kind of case study, and actually many aspects of psychedelic science, would we see more pro-social behavior, more protection of marginalized groups, protection of, more devotion to equity? I don't know. I think that psychedelics can be used to further personal power and status and money. And part of the commercialization we're seeing is that, things get co-opted, and academia is no exception. So I think that it's a powerful tool. It's a bit like the power, in Lord of the Rings, like the ring, and everyone wants to put it on, and you put it on, and it doesn't necessarily do good things to the ego. If the ego, the ego might be deactivated for a while and then spring back doubly hard afterwards. And as you say, the kind of, I am more of a healer than you, and I am more, like I have been given the message that I am a star child and that I need to help. I mean, I hear that kind of thing a lot. And these messages from, whatever they mean, I mean, they might be true. I do not know. I was, absolutely reserve judgment, but this strong conviction that some people have that they are of a different class of people, and that they are the chosen ones, and that they are indigo children or star seeds. And some of them are beautiful ideas, but it's like, if the actions meet the possibility and you see someone doing great things in the world, then that's okay, as you say, but if it's just the kind of ego inflation without the actual action and the service to others and making change in the world, then it's not necessarily going to be helpful. And right now, I think we need to really direct psychedelic use into, it's all hands on deck. We have like a decade really to mitigate against, to try and mitigate the worst outcomes of climate change. So let's really see how we can, we have issues with loneliness and disconnectedness in our societies and lots of systems changing. So how can we really target psychedelics so that we can, that it's almost like it's kind of past the time when we can sit around kind of, working on ourselves and polishing our crowns. And let's really see how we can consciously use these powerful tools to get cracking.
Yeah. Related to that, I was having a conversation the other day with a friend of mine, Paul Fulton. He's a psychologist here in the Harvard system and has done a lot of work with meditation practices and psychotherapy. And I was talking to him about the often repeated story. It was my personal story where people will have a psychedelic experience, and that will open the door to sort of spiritual perspectives, and maybe is becomes the motivation to take up a contemplative practice and the like. And he was pointing to, an interesting downside of this relationship between psychedelics and contemplative practice, I think related to what you're saying now, which is that, he had these peak non-dual experiences, the experiences, if you will, of the upper branches and the leaves, right? Of really a sense of oneness and interconnectedness. And he had the sense that, okay, that's what my meditation practice is supposed to produce. Mm. And then he was so frustrated that his meditation practice wasn't producing these bells and whistles. This is the star child experience, but it was very much, integrating just the hurts of the day, the childhood issues, the everything that comes up, and that it took him a while to realize that no, the purpose of these contemplative practices is here and now being a decent human being. And being a decent human being means having wisdom, which means, thinking about the consequences of our actions, for those near and far, and in the short run and the long run, which are totally the things that we need to do if we're going to not just rearrange deck chairs on the Titanic, but are going to deal with the challenges facing us. And I wonder, so what have you found are the ways to most help people take these non-ordinary experiences, including or expanded states of awareness, including these really profound ones, mystical transpersonal experiences, and then harness it into how to become a better person here and now in terms of being wiser and more compassionate in our actions?
Yes. I mean, oh, such a deep question, such an important one as well. And in many ways, I kind of, I don't really know where to begin. And I feel like I'm only just, in terms of my kind of experience with that, I'm kind of at the beginning of the journey as well, because I've been working with people so some of the people on the Imperial Psilocybin for Depression trial that was, I guess, like 5 years ago now. And then the second one, which was about 3 years ago now, ultimately. I'm still working with many of them. So in the long-term kind of journey, and we're colleagues in, the kind of the relationship has changed, and that we are now working together on a project. And it's been interesting to see with them. I've learned a lot about how, the one or two experiences in their trials have evolved into something else. And I guess where they are now is wanting to offer back to other people. So to use some of their insights and their learning to be there to support other people who have been in psychedelic clinical trials. Because I do think that there are so many ways that I think psychedelics can help in the time that we're in. One of them is, people that might have amazing creative ideas and solutions to some of the issues we face, but also very much people who are suffering from depression and other mental health difficulties. For them, it can have such a profound change and just allow them to engage in life in a way that was really difficult before. So I have, a lot of faith in the potential of allowing people that have been really stuck to come out of that stuckness through these kind of approaches. And I think the idea of being able to be in service, so being able to help other people, is one of the most therapeutic. I mean, as therapists, we know this, that it's our own healing to be able. There's nothing that makes you feel better if you're having a bit of a rubbish day and you're feeling down and you're feeling preoccupied with your own problems, to be able to have the privilege of hearing someone else and really feel that you can give them your presence, and you feel so much better about yourself too. It's not purely altruistic. It's partly our own, the joy of being able to be there for someone else. It's like a real deep intrinsic human need. And because we live in these atomized, quite digital societies, it's quite hard in a way to really have that sense of sitting around the fire with people and offering them our presence. So I think ultimately something around having an experience, taking away the key learnings from it, really being able to nurture them, continue that work with a group of people around you who are also on the same kind of journey and approaching it in the same very conscious way of, how can you change your habits on a daily basis? How can you continue to engage in your feelings, continue to music meditation that allows you to engage with feelings that come up from the rocky places, and continue to being willing to engage with those things. So having a community of people who have the same model, we're all working on the tree, we're all doing it together. But a very important part of it is moving on from when someone feels that they're on their own journey, is then offering it to other people, offering them that space. I think that's probably the bit that helps people the most, I think.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me, there's this often repeated quote from the Dalai Lama of, you want other people to be happy, practice compassion. You want to be happy yourself, practice compassion. That, as you're saying, it helps us at the same time that it helps others. So you've alluded just then to some of the lessons that people tend to take home from psychedelic experiences. Do they cluster? In other words, are there a group of messages that people take from maybe expanded states of consciousness generally?
Yes,
that you tend to see.
Yeah, I think so. I think I can kind of broadly take them around the roots and the branches, really. So I think the root ones tend to be around forgiveness. So people may have been trying for a very long time to forgive someone, or whether they were trying or not, they have been carrying big rocks, terrible things that have happened to them, and their roots are tightly wrapped around it, and they kind of can't let go. And if, their therapist might say, what about forgiving this person? And they will say, like, absolutely not, never, never. Or I've tried and I try and, you work on it, but you can't really do it. Sometimes, and it's probably one of the most rewarding things as a session guide to sit with, is somebody will just have this, it's like a moment of grace when this deep embodied sense of forgiveness. They understand that person's perspective, why they did it, how lost they were. It happened loads in the Imperial trial that people would describe being able to let go of long held grievances against caregivers, other people, because they suddenly have this sense of understanding that person was suffering and that they didn't know what, there was nothing else they could have done. And the relief that can give people is immense. So at the root level, I'd say kind of understanding more about their own experiences, forgiving themselves for things they've done, forgiving other people. So that kind of rocky stuff. And it's almost like the rocks kind of like, they get worn away and they kind of like dissolve all their minerals and nutrients into the ground, because then they can kind of just, that learning, that insight just can stay with them. And it's very humbling and it makes them so much wiser when they can hold that. It's an amazing thing to be able to do. I mean, it's, I was so full of awe with people when they were able to sit, and some of the things that people were able to forgive was truly extraordinary. And, there's no pressure. If someone isn't ready or it's not right, then there's no need to, but it sometimes just happened. And then I'd say at the branches, very, very commonly, we are all one. The hippies had it right in the 60s. Unity. We are all love. Everything is interconnected. Moving from beyond the ego and understanding this amazing interconnected web that we are a part of, and seeing Earth from afar and the beauty in it. So that's the beauty of our planet, the beauty of other people. So really, at both sides, it's kind of love and love. There's kind of love at the top and love at the bottom. Really, those are it comes down to love often.
Mm. And you've alluded to the importance of community and sharing in this, and you've actually pioneered some models of this, right? To create structures that can help people to carry these insights forward in their life. I wonder if you could, when I've heard you talk about it, I've been fascinated. They seem like a brilliant idea. Can you share with folks the structures you've created for people to do this?
Yeah. Oh, I'm very touched. Thank you. That's very kind. And actually, since we last spoke, it's come on a long way actually, because it's going. So it's a online community. Online is realistically how it needs to be for now, although we want there to be in-person, local aspects of it later on. But it's an online community for people who have, well, it's actually kind of for anyone. It can be for people that have had a psychedelic experience that they want to integrate, or an experience in meditation or breath work, or an experience that has broken them open in like a bereavement or a big loss. So any experience that people feel like, okay, I need to integrate, I need to do some, I need a good year of focusing on this. And it's a 12-month process. And it includes breath work. We have breath work. My lovely colleague Lee Menzeloff does lovely breath work journeys with people. But it also includes, it's structured around trees, which is no surprise, because it has this whole model around, a bit like I shared with you before, the different parts of the tree. And we talk about doing psychological photosynthesis, which is the idea that our trees, we stand on the rocks and we bring in mud, difficult stuff that we have to constantly work with in life. And through our trees, we turn it into sap like trees do. And we turn the challenges, the difficulty into the stuff that makes us grow and values and, growing towards meaning. So that's the kind of model. And we have 12 different trees that we focus on once a month. So every month there's a different tree. So we're in January, which is the silver birch, which is all about letting go of the old story and allowing yourself to be kind of blank in the present moment, like a clean white page. And every month there's a different tree, and we start the month with the tree journey, which is a guided imagery journey with specific music that's been created for it, alongside a narrative journey where people are guided to merge with that particular tree and learn the lessons of that tree. So this month we had the silver birch journey, which was all about letting go and, imagining our bark is kind of exhaling the things we don't need. Like silver birch bark kind of exfoliates off, it peels away to reveal the clean white bark underneath. So exfoliating what is past and making ourselves open to what's to come. And then at the end of the month, and then we have sharing circles where we have facilitators. And this is the part about service. So the people that I'm working with from the Imperial trials, they are our facilitators. So they have become sharing circle facilitators. So they hold space for the community. And then and that's to discuss how the tree journey was, what it brought up for people. And then there's another sharing circle at the end of the month for people to talk about how the lesson of that tree has kind of percolated through their month and their relationships and their behaviors every day. And we hope that when people then finish the 12 tree cycle, they can then become sharing circles for the new people. So our current sharing circle facilitators will help to train them. So it's this kind of expanding network, almost a bit like AA kind of fellowship idea, with the idea that it could really expand quite far, so that with the idea that, it won't resonate with everyone. Some people aren't really interested in trees and it feels a bit too kind of wacky for them. But for people that it resonates with, we just want it to be available for people, so that if anyone has been through one of these experiences and wants a community to integrate with and wants to use the metaphors of nature to help them grow, then we want it to be accessible to anyone that needs it.
Yeah, well, and a central part of this is you're helping people grow in connection with one another, right? Taking the lesson of the branches of the interconnectedness, or the lesson of the deep roots connecting to the mycelium, to really to not be doing this as a solo venture, but to be doing this in community.
Yes. And that's the bit that I think people find the most, that's the bit that's really lovely, when those relationships start to form and people start to make those friendships and feel that they're not on their own. And actually, for all of us that are launching this process, one of the sharing circle facilitators was saying the other day, he's starting another organization actually in the psychedelic space for advocacy for participant needs. And he was saying, this is really hard. Like, it's really hard launching something new. Like, there's no blueprint for this. It's really hard. But we're a forest. We are a forest. And when you feel that sense of interconnectedness that you kind of don't have to reach out for, but it's just there, you don't have to earn it. You just stand on it. And that you are like a forest. The mother trees are there sending you their nutrients, and you don't have to do it all on your own. It's an amazingly supportive thing. So it's, not just for the participants, but for the team. Like, for us, we are feeling that it's really challenging sometimes, but that we're incredibly grateful for feeling that sense of, we are a forest.
And I'm almost hesitant to bring this up, because in a sense I'd love to end on that note, but since we're talking about the wonderful benefits of touching into expanded states and then connecting in community and doing the integration work, are there situations in which cultivating expanded states isn't such a good idea?
Yeah, I think we're going to learn a lot more about those scenarios in the next years as it becomes so much more widely used. And I think there will be many people for whom it's just not, it's really not going to be helpful. And I think one of my colleagues from Imperial, Chris Timmerman, had this really lovely graph that he showed in one of our presentations that we did together. And it was showing, I wonder if I can remember it. It was showing a continuum from kind of divergence, chaotic, loose kind of thinking style to a very kind of rigid, solidified kind of concrete thinking style, with the idea that depression is a very stuck state and a very kind of concrete thinking style. And when you add this psychedelic agent, which is like, blowing it all open, brings in a lot of chaos. It's like an agent of chaos into that very stuck state. In a way, it's, it might have individual risks for some people, but really it's kind of a risk often that's considered worth taking in a careful setting with therapists and everything else. or, not necessarily therapists, but in a carefully held, warm, safe setting, that it brings in the chaos to that kind of stuck state. So it's like the needle might move to here and it might bring them to a healthy place of balance where they feel more open. But when someone is already in that very, very kind of more chaotic thinking style, divergent thinking, perhaps more prone to psychosis, perhaps, it's different for different people. And I get letters from people with bipolar and psychosis saying that actually psychedelics help them. So it's by no means one size fits all, but people that are more on that end of the continuum, introducing an agent of chaos there, it might just be so much too much. So I think there is an element of, not just because it's becoming popular and lots of people are talking about it, like really thinking about where people are at in their lives, like really thinking, do I have the resources? Do I have the time afterwards? Do I know this is safe? Because otherwise just like bowling into it and thinking it'll be okay, just because we've gone from that real stigma in the backlash to the 60s to now this like absolute opposite, like everyone should do it. And I think people can be complacent that actually it is still incredibly intense for many people. And there will be many people for whom it is triggers destabilization. So care is required.
And in general, I think expanded states, whether they come up in contemplative practice or more powerfully with psychedelics, executive functioning is offline for a while, right? When we're experiencing these things, and there's a lot of people who don't have enough executive functioning going on most of the time. And I hear what you're saying, that it's not going to be helpful to shake things up more for them.
Yeah, exactly. Shake things up is a nice way of saying it. Yeah, sometimes it's not the right time to shake up things in your life, Right.
So thank you so much. How can people learn more about your work if they want to know more about the tree model, want to know more about the integration program?
Yeah, so probably the best thing is, so the integration process, this community is Accept, Connect, Embody, Restore, ACER, and the website is www.acerintegration.com. And at the moment I'm kind of writing up as a little booklet. So at some point I will think about maybe publishing that just for anyone that's interested to read it. But at the moment it's mostly on the ACER integration website, and people can apply to join the community as well there.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom with us. I'm again inspired hearing your talk, and I just love the depth and the breadth and the nuance with which you understand these processes, and I really appreciate your sharing it with us.
Oh, thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.